The manhwa begins with the heroine lost in thought. What must it feel like to lose one's sight? As far as I can see, only murky black water. Even if I open my eyes, there is nothing but darkness. A heavy clammy fear envelopes my whole body. For him, no matter how much he struggles, there is no end in sight. He is dragged into an endless darkness. It feels as though he is sinking all alone in the middle of the deep blue sea. Even with his eyes shut, the darkness stretches on forever. In that deep darkness he struggled desperately. And I too, was struggling desperately. The whole manor is in an uproar as the maids in panic question aloud where Madame Selva is. She seemed to be delayed by the storm, of all days, for her not to come that day. A maid stepped forward, cautiously asking about the master, and the other maid reported that he was in the room ahead of them. She asked if there was a window open somewhere by chance for ventilation, and the maid responds again saying a maid had gone in that afternoon and might have opened the window. They suggested someone go in and check, however they were too scared to do so until she boldly grabbed the doorknob and pushed the door open. Almost instantaneously the smell of medicinal tea and wine hit her. Next, the groans of the master was clearer and sharper. He struggled on the bed all curled up, yelling in pain. She headed for the window thinking of how even the slightest of light would cause the master pain. She reached the window soon enough and pulled the curtains shut. Then she went to calm the master down a bit. To her shock, he suddenly grabbed her, pinning her down on the bed. Settling on top of her, he noted sternly, "A maid who sneaks into her lord's chamber has only one of two purposes: assassination or revenge. Who are you?" He continued detailing how that had been her aim. She would have hidden her presence well, wielded her weapon well, and more worldly enticing woman would have come. He suddenly grabbed her face, pondering aloud on what it was. Is your face truly that hideous, or perhaps both? He noted that he wouldn't call her enticing at all, asking if she believed because he was blind she could do as she pleased. His hand tightened around her throat as he asked if she knew who made him that way. "It was a maid just like you. I shall tell you how they were destroyed." He detailed how she drugged him with sleeping wine and slipped into his room and afterwards poured poison into his eyes. "When the war ended and I returned to this estate, my brother gave me the finest gift." He throws her to the side and demands that she tell him what orders she was given. Although, struggling to catch her breath, she explained that she'd come because of the heavy rain, so she came to close the window. However, he simply noted that he couldn't trust that. He reminded her that his eyes may be ruined but his body still functions. He asks if he were to shore a child somewhere, if it wouldn't be troublesome. He asks again if the order she received instead was for her to kill him off right away, and she immediately responds that he was mistaking things. However, he simply scoffed at her words. In response, she offered to prove it, asking him to search her body if he must, claiming she carried no weapons or poison. Her voice came again. This time she told him if he still doubted her after searching her, she will accept whatever punishment he decreed, and he agreed. He will indeed check every inch of her body, every last part of it. His fingers dug into her mouth, pressing hard on her tongue. As if that pressure wasn't enough, she heard his voice, asking if she was afraid now. He asked her to flee the house at once if she was afraid, and she responded resolutely saying she had nowhere to go. "So," he continued, "to betray trust." Then without warning he yanked the arc of her dress. "To be left voiceless. Come to think of it, this is the first time I've heard your voice." He asks for her name and she responds saying it's Rose. "I see, Rose, you will regret not fleeing this place while you had the chance," he finishes. On the northern outskirts in Delosa lies its master, is a man of most difficult and eccentric nature. And here strange rules are enforced. First, on the ground floor where the master resides, all light is forbidden. Second, in every room must be draped with black curtain to block the daylight. Third, everything has its appointed place and not even the smallest item must be moved at will. In this house, one must never question meaning. They obey and submit exactly as commanded, no matter what occurs, no one shows surprise. People call that place. When she finally stepped out of the master's room, everyone muttered in shock, wondering if the master could have done that. They call that place the House of Beasts. And she stepped into that house of her own will. Her parents were servants for the main Valdemara family. Their long-awaited daughter must have been incredibly precious to them. She was given a grand name, one far grander than she deserved. She ate better food and wore more grander clothes than her own parents, and just as her parents hoped, she enrolled in a boarding school in Cielsa, up in the north. She enjoyed her studies, and for her devoted parents, she became all the more voracious to learn. But if there was one tragedy. In the present day, a maid informs Rose that Madame Selva is looking for her. As for the price of that hope, she was made to bear her parents' sins. Later, she sits with Madame Selva, who checks up on her to see if her neck is okay. The head maid Madame Selva apologizes afterward, admitting she must have felt so shocked in the moment. However, she just brushes it off, saying it's all right, and she wouldn't quit because of something like that. The head maid, with her gaze lowered, suddenly confesses that the master is more better than when he'd first come to the mansion. It was on the night of a blizzard. He'd come with not so much as the Valdemara flag raised. He was brought there like a luggage tied to a saddle in a state where he couldn't even walk well without someone to support him. Even if he had no one to rely on in the main family, to think he would come all the way there to visit an old woman in such a remote place like that. Rose mentions that she heard she was the one who him, and the head maid explains that she was his wet nurse, which is why he treated her with such generosity. She continues sharing that with those very hands, she had the honor of caring for Lord Ezekiel, and even after he grew up he was an impeccable man, so upright and admirable. Rose sat in silence, not daring to utter a single word, as the head maid questioned what on earth the woman was like. How she dared do something like that to Lord Ezekiel. The head maid concludes without a doubt that Lord Arkanaz must be the one behind it all, even after it was Lord Ezekiel who'd gone to the army instead of Lord Arkanaz, the eldest son, calling him truly a shameless man. To think he would start such an ugly conflict just to take over the family. Rose, breaking her silence, asks if there are still no leads on the culprit, and the head maid reveals they were still gathering information, and according to Lord Ezekiel it was a young woman with brown hair. The head maid mentions in passing that she must be quite beautiful, retorting that if she was plotting with Lord Arkanaz, she wouldn't have ordinary looks. She continued, saying his weakness for women was far worse than the rumors said. It was in his nature, he can't help but make a move on any beautiful woman he sees. The head maid, in a soft smile, admits if her hair wasn't red she would have suspected her. After all, she was quite a beauty herself. Rose forces a smile, thanking her for her compliment, but in truth her mind still lingers on the word, red. Yes, her hair was redder than a normal brown, but not enough to be called red hair, so she wondered if people truly saw it as red. It was almost lunchtime, so the head maid suggested they end their chit-chat there, making sure to thank her for her hard work before leaving. The central figure who led them to victory in the War of the Roses, Ezekiel Valdemara. A hero of the nation who was supposed to return in triumph with brilliant looks, meant to enjoy lasting glory and praise. A poison not even enough to fill half of that tiny vial, stoke his sight and reduced him to little more than a beast. Now she sits with regrets, thinking, back then. If only I hadn't chosen that path. In a new scene she knelt pleading with Lord Arkanaz to forgive her. She explained that her parents were uneducated and they had made a terrible mistake. She pleaded with him to let her stone with her life, that he show mercy to her foolish parents just that once. But he responded coldly, asking why he should do so. And why should I have to do something like that? If I let you stone for two, lived with just one, wouldn't that be a loss for me? She lowered her head even more as she told him she was still young, she was also educated, so she could accomplish anything he asked of her. However, he simply called her insolent, asking what difference her efforts would make, asking if she thought he, the eldest son of the Valdemara family, would need help from a mere servant's daughter. However, if you really mean you'll do anything. He tossed her a vial. He explained that in 1 week, Ezekiel would return to Claris, she should make him drink that. She trembled with fear as she pondered on how she'd heard about it even in the north, that the eldest son of the Valdemira family's hatred was growing, fearing his place as the heir would be stolen by his younger brother returning as a triumphant war hero. She was hesitant, however. He simply asked if she hadn't mentioned that she would do anything. He stepped forward, his words piercing as he asked her not to misunderstand, explaining that now that she knew this, there's no way he'd let her live thinking she might tell someone. The moment he showed her that vial, her options disappeared. He noted as her towered above her afterwards. If you valued your life, you never should have come to me, it would have just ended with your parents' deaths. Noticing her reluctance, he decided to let her choose. Die, all three of you, or make sure you kill one person. She picked up the vial in the end and she commented her decision. Now that she was an accomplice, he asked her name, and when she said it he burst into laughter, remarking that her parents must have really treasured her to give her a name so far above her station. So you were raised with love? He bet she had such a happy family. However, he called it too conspicuous and asked that she use an ordinary name for now. Then he gave her the name Rose. He leaned forward, admitting close, she was quite the beauty. He asked if she was a virgin, catching her off guard, and he just called it a shame, saying virgins are a pain and they took too long to be taught. If he had the time, he'd drag her to his chambers right at that moment, but he reminded her afterwards that her parents' lives were in his hand and remarked that he'd be waiting for good news from her in 1 week. In a new scene, he returned from war and was celebrated by the people and returned to the mansion afterwards. She overheard the maids talking about how he'd skipped his meal to rest since he's been on the battlefield for so long and made sure to take this golden opportunity. She slipped into his room and held the vial closely to her chest. She watched him rest up so, taking in his every feature, his tanned skin and strength. She quickly realized his unit's flag was black too. The exploits of the 37th Regiment, which he belonged, were known throughout the Kingdom of Asturias, hoisting a blood-stained black flag. They were reversed as the king's army and would charge into the most crueling of all battles. They were the most valiant unit, bringing victory in war, and among them, Ezekiel Valdemiro was a renowned sniper. And to think that the life of Asturias' hero was now in her hands. Terror enveloped her and she hoped he would wake up at that moment, but she quickly dashed that thought, replacing it with one even crueler: if you just never woke up. Guilt caught up to her soon enough and she staggered backwards, thinking of how it was so wrong. She didn't realize it until she bumped into a table behind her. She turned around to find a gun behind her, but unknowingly she had one way or the other set it off. Luckily, Ezekiel opened his eyes at the right time and the shit hit a vase nearby. He checked up on her immediately, but that simple gesture sent her straight into panic. She realized soon how bad her situation was. She played the situations in her head, how in a few minutes, she'd have to explain the vial of strange liquid in her hand. Who have the order and why she snuck in there. The moment all that is revealed, it'll truly be all over. She recalled her parents and immediately thought to escape. Somehow, the liquid got into his eyes, and while he screamed in agony, she fled for her life. She fled, wishing she had just been hit by that stray bullet instead. He saved her, and yet she was found later by her parents. They explained that Agony had let them go. They said that man had lost his eyesight completely. They were going to start searching for the culprit in Valdemira, so they had to leave as soon as possible. They informed her they got paid for that job, so she didn't have to worry about tuition and could just go back to school. Let's meet again when you graduate. Yes, her parents knew, they knew what she had done. In a new scene, she appeared to be taking care of a child when she heard the men discussing. They discussed about how the doctors in the north were all busy. There was a Valdemira villa in Delosa. They've gathered all the northern doctors there. They say all the windows are covered with black curtains and they don't even turn on the lights, and one could heat something like moaning morning and night. It's even got the nickname, the Beast's Manor. On that day, as if possessed, she headed for Delosa. She knew he was there. She couldn't tell if it was atonement or hypocrisy. There was only one thing she could say for certain. A person can never escape the sins they've committed, they can never be free. In a new scene, Rose comments on the amounts of empty liquor bottles the master had apparently downed. The head maid with a saddened expression confirmed that it was true, however she explained that he wasn't always like that, he never used to drink alcohol, he always said a soldier must not get drunk. But he's been a different person since he lost his sight. She asked if he was alright drinking that much and the head maid Simony responded he really shouldn't but they couldn't stop him, because he was enduring such terrible agony. The throbbing pain in his head is the worst it's ever been. She mentions that there was even a time his men had to jump on him to stop him from gouging out his own eyes. He couldn't sleep at all at first but now with alcohol and Rosanam, he's managed to regain some composure. The head maid admits she's a little worried these days because Rosanam is hard to get and Rise simply asks if since the war is over, the supplies shouldn't start to recover little by little. The head maid then explained that even with the war over, there were still many soldiers suffering from the side effects of the war. The master only gets a few bottles mixed in with the alcohol, send in the supply shipments. One couldn't get it no matter how much money they offered, and no other medicine worked. Rose remained silent, a single question lingering in her mind: who would believe it? That this man who can't last a day without liquor and medicine moves around and lives on the first floor of the mansion as if he can see it with such a composed demeanor. He hasn't completely lost himself, he hasn't given up yet. That strengthened her own resolve too. She pulled out a blindfold, reminding herself she's come to that mansion prepared to become his eyes, his hands and feet. She'll stone for her sins even if she had to dedicate her life to it. She has to take responsibility and protect him. The first floor was always dark and hard to walk through. But with her eyes covered, even taking a single step was terrifying. Which all made her question just how much effort he'd put in. He must have walked through every room on the first floor, pacing the same stride hundreds of times until it was all burned into his memory. The overwhelming smell of liquor and medicine suddenly came her way and even before she realized it, she bumped into someone. Ezekiel, alert as usual, ordered her to identify herself, immediately tossing her harshly to the ground. He asked sternly if Selva hadn't told her, repeating he said nothing should ever instruct the first floor. She apologized, saying she wasn't told. Then at that moment, the head maid stepped in and asked what she was doing there. She explained to Lord Ezekiel that she was the new maid who just began working in the laundry. She went to Rose and asked why her eyes were covered, and she explained that she thought she should try and anticipate for the inconveniences the master doesn't voice. However, he simply let out a sharp scoff. Covering your eyes? Your job is laundry done overstep. He demanded to know if she was mocking him or if she believed he needed her pity. The head maid explained that Rose was a kind and sincere girl, saying she's sure she wants to be of help. Before he left, he passed a Coke, warning for her to know her place. Later, she was doing laundry when she suddenly felt pain in her hand. She wondered if she perhaps twisted it when she fell and thought to herself that she couldn't afford to be thrown out of the mansion, so she had to stay strong. Just then a maid rushed in to meet her. She informed her that something terrible had just happened. She explained that the master rarely ever got annoyed, but that day he was dining in the hall just moments ago when her reached for a glass of wine and missed the glass. Pathetic, every last one of you is useless. Is putting things in their proper places really that hard? He spat in anger. He ended up flipping the whole table, good and drink spilling everywhere anyways. She informed her the head maid had asked her to bring some towels and collect the wet clothes. The man complained that she couldn't take the master's unexpected outbursts anymore. She only put up with it because the pay was good, but the constant tension was suffocating. A few minutes later she stood at the door with some towels. She got in and the head maid asked her to come there. She asked her to help the master with his shirt and she agreed, but once she stepped inside she was immediately stunned. His physique was something, she definitely never expected that. Who could have immediately seen him like that? She wondered. Major Ezekiel Valdemira, behind that brilliant glory, such scars were hidden. As the second son of House Valdemira, he became an officer at a young age, always leading from the front, guiding his troops, bearing the torment of war to uphold his family honor. And yet, after finally surviving and returning home, this is the kind of life that awaited him. She wondered what she was supposed to do, how she could ever stone for that sin. Later, the head maid thanks her for her assistance. However, she thanks her instead, saying she was only able to do that without any troubles because she was there. If it had just been only her, he could have gotten angry. The head maid takes this opportunity to confide in her. She admits, sometimes she can't help but worry, her time left in the world isn't very long. When she's gone too, Lord Ezekiel will need someone by his side. Someone steadfast, trustworthy, someone willing to understand what he's going through. For the first time, the head maid didn't concert all her thoughts, she kept the thought of how much she knew things couldn't continue like that. When Lord Akenaz inherits the main house, there will be no one left to protect Ezekiel. She wants thinking of a loyal subject. Her thoughts wandered to how even the other servants, whenever Lord Ezekiel scolded them, they'd scatter afraid to get even close, but Rose was different. So she naturally wondered, maybe Rose could be the one. Pulling her out of her thoughts, Rose suddenly speaks, reminding her she had something to say to her. The head maid confirms it, however, just as she's about to admit what she believes about her, another maid calls for her. She walks up to her holding a letter and explains that it has come for the master. She takes the letter and then, glancing at Rose, she asks if she isn't curious what it says. Then she asks her to come with her. She goes to the master with the letter. He asks who it's from, and when he realized she isn't speaking, he asks why she is silent. She apologized instead, saying her eyes are blurry so she can't read it well, and instead she must find someone who can. Rose, without wasting, tells her it says Captain Monkham. He responds with a hint of shock, asking if she can read. She explains that she'd gone to school although she didn't graduate. He asks what she studied and responds in one breath, sharing that she's learned about poetry, novels and composition, as well as history, geometry and even algebra, so she can confidently handle ledgers without any troubles. His next question comes as a shock. He asks why she's working as a mere servant if she went to school. She responds calmly, explaining that she doesn't consider laundry to be just a trivial task. She believes it's a respectable job to prepare clean clothes for him every day. He responds saying laundry and cooking are respectable jobs, but what he finds most curious is, if she has such abilities, she would find a much better job in the city, so then why was she working as a servant in such a remote place? He just doesn't understand. She went stiff. She realized now that he was suspicious of her. He came all the way there to avoid a bloody conflict with his own brother. Now that he's lost his sight, he's completely defenseless, so it's only natural that he be wary of outsiders. And yet if she hadn't been the one to blind him. She lowered her gaze as she muttered under her breath, I would have certainly found my way her. Then she admits she wanted to work there. She was a student at the Moonlite Women's Academy. Near the end of the War of Roses, she remembers that day as though it were yesterday. The Abiros counterattack overwhelmed the Batolier forces, and the flames of war quickly engulfed Chelsea. The students of Moonlite Women's Academy were trapped in the school building, unable to move. All they could do was close the doors and pray. Her colleague rushed in and informed her the troops had retreated. They stepped outside to the balcony to confirm it, and it was true, they'd all disappeared. They appeared to have left Chelsea. Beyond the hill, only the David unit was left. They wondered if they were going to become prisoners. Another countered, saying they didn't have any value, they might just be killed off instead. The kids cried for their mom, and she through it all remained calm. She asked the others to remain calm and then suggested they might spare their lives if they surrendered themselves. She encouraged them not to give up. But a miracle occurred. They spotted a black flag and understood immediately, it was the king's army. It was Major Valdemira. When everyone had given up and fallen into despair, they appeared waving the black flag, a symbol of victory. Amongst the many units, they were called the King's Army, a special group of warriors entrusted with only the most special missions, the undefeated 37th Regiment. And the hero who built his fame, Ezekiel Valdemira. Seeing the young officer commanding the battlefield, reigning the black flag, a symbol of victory, they had not been abandoned. The 37th Regiment and Ezekiel, they did but abandon the weak, they hadn't been abandoned. And so Molino Women's Academy was saved by the King's army. After the victory at Chelsea, they began to advance further north, their momentum rising. They threw the rose petals that covered their school as a symbol of gratitude. The red rose petals danced with the black flag. She saw a particularly tall figure amongst them, and even from the distance, she could tell it was the major. So, she instinctively let release the rise in her hand, and just like fate, the wind let the rose straight into his hand and he caught it. Ah, how could she ever forget that day? She prayed with all her heart, may all the glory and blessings in those world be with him in his future. Like a rose that only blooms for a moment, it was a hollow prayer that shattered and scattered to pieces. But I myself was the one who made it so. And so foolishly I pray again as a sinner, knowing it will not be heard. Even if I am never forgiven, please just let me live by his side, that's all I want, I wished with all my heart. The head maid silently observed them. These two individuals. One a former hero famed in the Astery War, now reduced to a noble, stripped of his sight through treachery and cast into exile. And the woman whose life he once saved, who longed to repay kindness, finding no other way she chose to serve by his side. A bond once thought broken begins to weave together anew. Could this perhaps be destiny itself? The head maid wondered excitedly. The head maid gushed over her story, calling such a connection a touching tale. That explained her devotion. She wanted to honor the one who rescued her, but only her knew. Only her knew the truth that flooded her heart. Twice he saved her, and she answered that grace with betrayal. The head maid turned to the master and suggested he takes Rose as his personal maid. She praised her, saying she was silent, well-educated, and would even be of great help to her, explaining that if they both shared duties then things will be lighter on her end. He agreed without any thoughts, and she informed Rose she will serve Lord Ezekiel from that day on as his personal maid. The head maid ordered for her room to be moved next to Lord Ezekiel's and for another person to be assigned to laundry. Then the head maid handed her the letter telling her she wouldn't give her more tasks, she wanted her to only devote herself entirely to Lord Ezekiel. She was entrusting him to her, and after saying that, she stormed off. She was asked to first examine the seal, then he asked her to read it out loud. Opening it, she realized it was a search report, but still, she went straight to reading. Major Valdemira Minicam Division, based on descriptions of brown hair, hazel eyes, we investigated a beautiful woman, late teens to 20s. Questioned servants of the main estate in secret. That day a stranger fitting the descriptions was seen lending help in the kitchen. They recalled a striking newcomer, but her whereabouts is unknown. They assumed she caught Akenaz's attention and was taken under his roof. But it seems such incidents are common at the manor. We'll continue tracing the women Akenaz has dealt with recently. That ends the report. He confirmed that it matched what he observed and remarked that she was truly the kind of woman Akenaz would be drawn to. She handed him the letter, and from that brief contact he was able to notice her cold hands. His mind drifted to the other day as well. Her body was chilled like ice. He could picture the kind of expression she must have been wearing. The women he saw in the wartime ruin all carried the same look. It pained him so much that he even forbade his own soldiers from pillage and cruelty. And yet he wronged this woman himself. Still, she chose to remain and serve there. He assumed she must be desperate for coin, but recalling her call him Major. Oddly enough, that word was so pleasant to hear, though it was the first time it carried a strange familiarity. Yes, it feels like something similar happened before. He asked for her age and she replied saying 19. His silence afterwards immediately sent her straight into panic. He might suspect who she really was. To her surprise, he just asks if she hadn't graduated at 19. Her cheeks reddened as she explained that she'd enrolled late. She had money problems, but it wasn't due to bad grades. He just retorted, to leave without graduating and to then end up in a place like this, how disappointing. But she suddenly speaks up, "No, I don't regret it, not in the least." He asks what his face looked like, saying a Milena student should remember such details. He added once his eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. He also mentioned Selva always praised her as beautiful and gentle, but she just dismissed the comment, saying the headmaid was only just exaggerating. But then he suddenly asked if he shall see for himself then. He walked up to her, then he reached for face. His fingertips traced her nose bridge all the way as his other hand gently held her face up. He slipped off her scarf and reached for the back of her hair. He pulled out her hairpin and took a portion of her hair in his palm after. "Your hair is long, what color is it?" Just as she was about to respond, something suddenly occurred to her. If she said brown, he'd ask about her eyes. Brown hair, hazel eyes, late teens, if he realized I fit the description. Will he let me go? What do you think happens next? Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also leave a comment if you enjoyed watching this video.